Well, hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Terri Cole Show. I am Terri Cole, your host, and I've been going through the emails that you guys are sending me because I've asked you to give me ideas of what do you really want to master? What is it that you need to learn so that your life runs more smoothly, is easier for you? So one person wrote in and talked about the fact that she's super indecisive and that she just can't seem to make a decision and not ruminate about it for days and hours and wherever. Also asking a lot of people what she should do. So if you struggle with being decisive, this episode is for you. And if you're super decisive, I have some news for you. So this episode might be for you as well. So let's start with, what are the reasons that people suffer from chronic indecision? Well, part of it is that we have modeled behavior. So a lot of times we saw it somewhere. You might come from a long line of chronic indecision people, right? That is possible. So much of what we learn in our family of origin, of course. And if you saw your mother or your father labor over decision making, this is sort of a downloaded blueprint about how to make decisions. So in the, I have a cheat sheet for you. It's like a PDF. I'm including questions so that you can start to identify if you actually do come from a long line of people who suffer from the inability to strategically make decisions. Because what I find from being a psychotherapist for over 20 years is that people fall into two camps when it comes to making decisions. You can be in the camp of, I'd always decide right away. I just follow my gut. There you go. Or you can be in the camp of, I ask every person I've ever known, all of my friends. I talk about it multiple times to multiple people. And even once I make a decision, I'm second guessing if I made the right one, in quotes. So let's talk about what that is. What does that mean when you have that experience? There's insecurity, right, inside, but there's fear. So besides having a parent who might have modeled that behavior, what else could have happened? Well, if you grew up in a family system where if you made the quote unquote wrong decision, you were punished or blamed, or if there was a lot of criticism within your family of origin, sort of that no matter what decision you made, you might get shit for it, or people might say you should have made the other decision, right? So this can put us in this state of not wanting to deal with making decisions or having a lot of anxiety associated with making decisions. So what ends up happening? A lot of times we will procrastinate making a decision. And then what do you think might happen if we do that? Well, that decision then gets made. So sometimes our default position, because of having anxiety around making the wrong choice, is that things don't happen. And you don't have to take ownership of it. You just kind of ran out of time, so to speak. But that's a decision too. So like not deciding because you're too busy writing like a thesis or your PhD about the pros and cons, is kind of still deciding, especially if your time frame runs out or if the steam, the heat that was propelling that decision forward, if we wait long enough, we're not putting attention on that steam and that heat from us and from others involved. If someone's waiting for a decision from you, it goes away. So something that can be so exciting and so interesting and like it could potentially change your life, let's say. If you wait 2 weeks or 3 weeks, then do you still have that same level of excitement, or do you think other people will have it? No, the answer is no. So there's a lot of sort of self-sabotaging, sneaky ways that if making decisions are difficult, we can find to not make them, right? And this is where I ask you to look at the secondary gain of not making decisions, or the secondary gain of so much self-torturing about decisions. The not making decisions, what do you think? And secondary gain, if you are not familiar with that term and you haven't seen any of my other videos where I talk about it, secondary gain is the unobvious, the not obvious gain that you get from a decision. And it can be very counterintuitive because a lot of times I use this with clients, or I will give people in my courses or watching my videos this as a tool to basically uncover hidden resistance or hidden self-sabotaging. And so what is secondary gain? It basically means the question that you ask yourself is, what do I get to not do, not feel, not experience, or not face by not deciding? If you grew up in a system where any decision you made, you felt like you were screwed either way, you get to avoid that exact situation. Even though it isn't the best for your productivity, for your life, probably not the best for your relationships. But think about it. The little kid in you wants to avoid negative feedback from their parents. And of course, this is dysfunctional in that you're grown up, right? But that apparently the child within you didn't get the memo. And so that part of you is still fearful and gets activated when you feel pressured to make a decision. And for some people, it doesn't even have to be other people pressuring you. It could simply be that making any decision is stressful. So other ways, anyway, let me finish about secondary gain, which is that, and this will also be in the cheat sheet, so don't worry, you don't have to write it down now, but understanding that the secondary gain, because in every situation you could actually use the secondary gain questions to understand things from a different perspective. Because secondary gain is not primary gain, right? Or it would be called primary gain. Primary gain is you go to the gym, and the primary gain is to, have muscles, right? So if you don't go to the gym, the obvious thing is that you're not going to become fit. But there might be another secondary gain. So maybe you got some unwanted attention growing up for your body. So maybe you really don't go to the gym because the secondary gain from not going is you not being in the same type of physical body that you were when you were sexually harassed or assaulted or whatever might have happened to you. And that may not be obvious. Hence why it's called secondary. But it's a very helpful tool for you to uncover resistance, or for you to uncover these sort of self-sabotaging behaviors that you may not even be conscious of, which is why it's so great to know it, because then you can actually use it. So anytime you feel stuck, and even with the decision making, because that's what we're talking about, ask yourself, what do I get to not feel, not experience, not face, not do by not making this decision, or by waffling? For a long time, when you're waffling between the yes and the no of that decision, you get to not be afraid that you made the wrong one. You keep switching your mind. But it's a brief gain, because in the end we have to make decisions. And of course, if we don't, they will be made anyway. They just won't usually be made in your highest good or your best interest if you're not looking at it from sort of this strategic way. And we got to get the charge out of why it is so anxiety provoking for you to do it. I think that the questions in the little cheat sheet that I'm going to give you about your family of origin will be very helpful for you to see where were these influences? What influenced the young you around decision making? Sometimes we don't have the skills because growing up, and if we stayed connected to our family in this way, that decisions were made for you. And I had adult clients whose parents were still super weighing in on their decisions, to the point that I really felt like the parents were actually making the decision for the client. And that those are unspoken agreements as well. Some parents never can successfully negotiate the transition from parenting children to having a relationship with adult children, where you'll always feel parental towards them. If you're a mom, you're never not going to feel maternal towards them. But it's different than parenting them, like thinking that it's appropriate to be in on what they should do, weighing in, disagreeing with their choice, even though it's their personal right to make that choice. So unconsciously, the unspoken agreement is, you don't want to not be a parent because you don't know who you are, so I won't grow up. But of course, there's a cost to all of that, and the main cost is to the adult child in that situation who is not exercising their right as an adult, staying in a much smaller position and in a much smaller life usually, because there has to come a point in life if you become, right, this whole human that we all want to, and I just mean your evolution, I don't mean perfection, of course, that we have to be able to stand in our own truth, where we have to take responsibility for our decisions, for the fruit of those decisions, for whatever happens because of those decisions. And the problem with having your parents being way overly involved, or anyone being way overly involved in that, is that it's easy to scapegoat them and be like, well, Betty said to do whatever, and if she hadn't, I don't think I would have. Well, who told you to listen to Betty? Right? That's not Betty's responsibility, that's your responsibility. But it gets very disordered and distorted when parents of adult children really don't want them to be adults. So you're not doing your kids a service if you're continuing to pay for everything. They're full adults, even if you have money. I know many families who are very wealthy, and the healthy way to do it is put that money in a trust that they get when they're like 40, so that they are inspired to create a life of their own, successes of their own, because this is where self-esteem comes from. This is where knowing who you are comes from. It does not come from people handing it all to you. I find that in my practice, the most insecure people are people who've had it all handed to them, where people are like, you're so amazing, but it's not that you're not amazing, but you know that you've never done anything amazing because you've never been given the opportunity. Right? And that's also a parent that wants to stay in the center of your life, where the healthy transition is that the parents have a much fuller life after children are grown, and they go back to having a similar life that they had, full, different, continuing to explore in their own evolution. And you hope that your grown children, that their family that they create, their partner that they choose, becomes the center of their life, and that they make decisions together. If my adult children come and they say to my husband and I, what do you think? This is where we are. We'll certainly tell them. They don't. Two of my kids were like, oh my God, we just bought a house. I was like, wait, I didn't even know you were buying houses. I mean, they do live far away from us, so it isn't like we could go look at it. But afterwards I was like, you know what? Right on. They're adults. They are in a secure way figuring this out with their life partner, with the person they chose to make a life with. And they don't need our approval to buy their homes, and they've done incredibly well. Like they've done beautifully. So anyway, oh my God, I'm getting off topic. Go back to topic. The last thing I want to say about this is there is a lot of codependency. Codependency can be very connected to not being able to make a decision. So let's talk about codependency. What does it look like? When you are a codependent, or a high-functioning codependent, as this crowd pretty much is usually, you know what everyone else should be doing, don't we? Be honest. Don't we kind of are like, yeah, this person's doing the wrong thing. This person's doing the right thing. I think they should change this or change that. Someone comes to you, you can't wait to tell them and find resources for them and all of those things. But here's the thing. A lot of people who are highly codependent are highly indecisive. So that same knowing, the knowing they have about your life, they don't know about themselves. They have a tough time making those decisions for themselves. And as I said before, they may avoid decision making altogether and basically daydream, right? There's all these different ways that we can avoid making decisions. How many of you live in a fantasy world? There's a lot of that with codependency, right? You are not living in reality when you're thinking about these great things that are going to happen, but you're not actually making the decisions that you need to make to put yourself in a position so that those things can come to fruition. So if you weren't, where does this stem from? If you weren't allowed to make decisions as a child, that's one. Growing up with super controlling parents, right? Authoritarian parents, this can be another. Not being taught. So much of the time, nobody taught us how to make decisions like, hey, there's an actual process of making decisions, learning how to weigh the pros and cons, which I'm going to get to in a sec, but what other things can get in the way of making decisions when you're codependent and even when you're not? Fear of making a mistake, fear of self-judgment, fear of judgment of others, wanting to please someone else. So you may not make the decision you want to make because you know that your sister doesn't want you to move away, or you know that your partner wants you to stay at the firm you're at, or whatever it is. So when you don't know what you feel and you're not skilled sort of thinking through, right, the consequences of and probable outcomes of your actions, this can get you in that state. Like small decisions can feel huge and can put you in what we were talking about before, that state of being able to see it from all sides. I also have to say, in my own personal experience with empaths and being an empath, that when you feel a lot, when you are very dialed into other people's feelings, it's like you can see everything from both sides. So many times clients have said to me, like, I know my mother is like, did this wrong thing and those wrong things and that wrong thing, but I understand why her mother did that. Or I'm like, okay, but your healing won't come from basically already understanding and forgiving your mother before you even process, before the little kid in you has had a chance to even say what they experienced with a witness. But it's almost like being able to see too much of both sides, because all of that going back and forth really does block your ability to feel your gut instinct, to be dialed into your body. So I'll give you a couple of ideas in the little cheat sheet, in the thing that you can download, the PDF, about how you can be more grounded in your physical body. So if you do the psychological things, you're going to answer some of the questions from your family of origin, which is basically your indecision downloaded blueprint, to see basically if you have one and where it came from. Understanding a little bit more about your codependent tendencies, and then basically moving into this next phase, which is you have to be able to hear the wisdom of your body when we're making a decision. And of course, I'll give you some ideas, like you can make a pros and cons list, sure. But it's the ability to know what your body is telling you that will really get you in touch with your gut instinct. And that's another way of making decisions. And the last thing I want to say about decision making, if it's difficult for you, is that sometimes people who seem to be very astute decision makers are really very impulsive decision makers. And if you ask them, because I've had this in my practice as well, if you ask them, well, what was the result of you being so quick to decide and you could just do it? They would say half the time they ended up feeling like it wasn't the right decision. And that was with my clients, who then we uncovered that it was their anxiety about making the decision that made them just want to make it and get it over with. So basically, the waffler, right, the back and forth one, the hemming and hawing, and the quick draw, that could be different sides of the same coin, which is a tendency towards indecision and anxiety about making the wrong choice and feeling like you may not know. So I cannot wait to hear what you have to say about this. If you found this helpful, please share it on your social media platforms. please download. Most of the info that you're going to need to kind of fill in and a little bit of journaling is going to be in that cheat sheet that I've created for you. So please download it if you actually want to get the benefit of this information in your life. Because it's one thing, you can understand what I'm saying theoretically, and I know that you do, but that's different from taking your time and your space in your mind to think about you, to answer the questions that I'm posing to you, because we are all so unique. And I have these theories based on 22 years of experience and based on what I know as a psychotherapist. But really, you're so unique that to really figure it out, you've got to be willing to actually do the work. And I'm more than happy to provide you with work to do. So that's why we're a great fit. So whether you are watching this on YouTube, whether you're listening to it on iTunes or wherever else you get your podcast, whether you're watching it on terricole.com, my website, I want to say thank you for watching, for listening, for reading, and for taking your time out of your life to actually care about your own mental health. Because when one of us gets healthy, the whole world gets just a little bit healthier than it is right now. And wow, we could really use more mental health in this world, could we not? Yes, we could. So I want to say thank you. I hope this was helpful, and I hope you have an amazing week, and take care of you.